Have you ever really thought about what connects, say, a tiny little microbe to a massive blue whale? Well, today we're diving into that exact connection. We're talking about ecosystems. And trust me, it's a concept that will totally change how you see the world around you, from a simple puddle to, well, the entire planet. Let's get into it. Okay, so what could a huge forest and a tiny little puddle in your garden possibly have in common? I know, it sounds like a trick question, right? One is massive and ancient, the other might not even be there tomorrow. But the answer? Well, it gets at one of the most fundamental ideas in all of biology. They are both complete, functioning worlds. They're both ecosystems. So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to untangle this incredible web of life. Then we'll break down the essential building blocks that make up every single ecosystem. After that, we'll see how nature's engine actually works, what happens when things go wrong, and finally, we'll talk about our own role in this whole story. All right, let's start with that big idea, the web of life. You know, understanding ecosystems is really about learning to see all the amazing and often invisible connections that are happening all around us every single day. The best way to think about it is like a perfectly choreographed dance. Every single organism has a role to play, and every move it makes affects everyone else on the dance floor. This idea, this interconnectedness, is the absolute heart of what an ecosystem is all about. Okay, so this idea of a web or a dance is great, but what's it actually made of? Let's zoom in a little and look at the real, tangible building blocks of any ecosystem. And there you have it, the official definition. The most important thing to get here is those two distinct parts. You've got the living community, all the plants and animals, and then you have the non-living environment, things like air, water, and sunlight. The real magic happens right where those two things meet. And what's so incredible is just the sheer scale of it all. An ecosystem isn't just something massive like the Amazon rainforest. It could be a desert, a river, a single small pond. Heck, it can even be that puddle in the garden we talked about. They all operate on the same basic rules. So let's break that down just a little bit more. When scientists talk about the living and non-living parts, what are they actually talking about? This is where we get into the real nuts and bolts. So every single ecosystem has two sides to the coin. On one side, you've got the biotic factors. That's easy to remember. Bio means life, so it's all the living or once living stuff. On the other side, you have the abiotic factors, all the non-living things. You absolutely need both for an ecosystem to work. Let's meet the living cast, shall we? You've got three main players. First up, the producers. Think plants. They actually create their own food. Then come the consumers, animals that eat other things. And finally, you have the unsung heroes of the whole operation, the decomposers. These are the bacteria and fungi that break everything down and get it ready to be used again. And the abiotic factors? Well, if the living things are the actors, the abiotic stuff builds the stage. The amount of sunlight, the type of soil, the temperature, the water, all these things set the rules for the game. They basically decide who can even live there in the first place. All right, so we've got our cast of characters and we've got our stage. Now it's time for the action. How does this whole system actually work? What keeps nature's engine humming along? Now, this is a really, really important distinction to make. Two key processes are always happening. First, you have energy flowing. Think of it like a one-way street. Energy comes in, it gets used, and then it's gone. It cannot be recycled. But nutrients, they cycle. They're like nature's Legos, constantly being broken down and rebuilt into new things over and over again. They never leave the system. So let's just follow that energy for a second on its one-way trip. It all starts with the sun, right? That energy gets captured by plants through photosynthesis. Then an animal eats that plant, and another animal eats that animal. But here's the key. At every single one of those steps, a bunch of that energy is used up and lost as heat. It's a one-way ticket. Okay, so we've seen how a healthy system is supposed to work. It's this beautiful, balanced dance. But what happens when that balance gets disturbed? What happens when one of the dancers falls? This is that idea of interdependence in action. Because everything is so tightly connected, a change to just one little piece, whether it's biotic or abiotic, can send shockwaves through the entire system. It really is like a line of dominoes. I mean, just picture a healthy forest. It's the perfect example of balance, right? The trees are providing food and shelter, the animals are using the trees, and down in the soil, tiny organisms are recycling nutrients to keep everything fertile. It's a system in perfect harmony.
But then you introduce a massive disruption like deforestation. You take away the trees. Suddenly, that entire system is thrown into complete chaos.
And the effects are immediate. Animals lose their homes. The soil quality plummets because there's less material for decomposers to work with. You can even change local weather patterns. By removing just that one piece, the whole structure starts to crumble. And it's not just giant forests. It works the same way in that little pond. You add some pollution, an abiotic change, and the effects cascade. It kills some fish, which then reduces the oxygen in the water, which then affects all the other life in the pond. See? It's a chain reaction. Which brings us to a really crucial final point. We aren't just watching this happen from the sidelines. We are active players in these ecosystems, and believe me, our actions have huge consequences. Through things like pollution, deforestation, and climate change, we are often the biggest source of that disruption we were just talking about. So really, understanding how these systems work is step one to figuring out how we can better protect that. When you boil it all down, it comes back to this one idea. Ecosystems are all about flow, cycles, and, most importantly, balance. And keeping that balance isn't just some nice idea. It is absolutely essential for the survival of all life, and that includes us. So I'll leave you with this final thought. Now that you can see that web of connections in your own backyard, or the park down the street, or the river that runs through your city, what role are you going to play? What's one thing you can do to help maintain that delicate balance?